Do you have a dream car? Mine is the Lucid Air. Are you intrigued by electric vehicles? The Lucid Air EV has been called the best driving car in the world. And the Lucid Air Sapphire is certifiably the fastest production car in the world. Listen to Lucid Driver Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts or at luciddriver.buzzsprout.com.
Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyofacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyofacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome my guest, Jason Gelineau. Jason is the answer to the Joy of Cruising podcast trivia question, as he is the dad of a previous guest, the lovely violinist and cruise ship performer and Grammy winner, Emily Gelineau, my guest for episode 199. But I certainly don't mean to trivialize Jason's appearance. In my view, Jason transcends cruising, similar to certain other guests I have hosted, like travel and hospitality icon Scott Eddy, episode 29, and Sarah Dandashi, episode 130, or individuals who transcend the history of consumer cruising, like Joe Farkas, the designer of Carnival's entire fleet from inception through 2011, in episode 30. Or Richard Fain, Chairman, Royal Caribbean Group, episode 215. Or Lisa Ludolph-Perlo, former CEO, Celebrity Cruises, episode 81. And finally, featured through his daughter, the late Everett Phillips, the father of modern cruise ship food and beverage, episode 57. Jason Gelineau is a highly regarded luxury cruise industry expert with more than 30 years of experience across shipboard operations, shoreside leadership, and global cruise brand development. Throughout his career, Jason has worked with some of the world's most prestigious cruise brands, including Silversea Cruises, Seabourn, Oceania Cruises, and the World of Residensea. He previously served as head of product for Explora Journeys, where he led the development of the onboard guest experience for MSC Group's luxury lifestyle cruise brand, shaping its hospitality concept, service philosophy, and experiential vision from inception to launch. Based in Western Australia, Jason is the founder of JAG Hospitality, a specialist cruise and hospitality consultancy, and currently serves as a Seatrade Cruise Ambassador for guest experience and wellness. A frequent speaker and moderator at international cruise forums, he is widely recognized for his insight into luxury cruising, evolving guest expectations, and the future of high-end experiences at sea. Welcome, Jason, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Paul, great to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
So, how you doing?
Fantastic. Actually, really, really fantastic. I'm about to head to the airport in a few hours to fly over to Miami, a 30-hour journey from Perth in Western Australia, where I live. So I'll be flying from here to Melbourne, on to Dallas, and then into Miami, and getting ready for Seatrade Cruise Global, which is coming up in Miami Beach.
Wow, what a flight. So now, help me get my bearings straight. What time is it you're in Australia, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I'm 12 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time in North America. So right now, as we're recording, it's 9 p.m. on Tuesday night, my time.
Okay, okay. So, listeners, it's 9 a.m. here, so I seriously still have my morning voice.
Well, I didn't have any wine with dinner, so I still have my day voice. So we're good.
Yeah, I'm sipping my coffee as we speak. So we before we talk, Jason, about your rich history in cruising, tell our listeners some basics about yourself. Where you're from, where you live. I think I just divulged that. And anything else you would like to share about yourself.
Thanks, Paul. As I mentioned, I live in Perth, Western Australia, but as my accent gives away, it's not where I'm originally from. I was born and raised in Ottawa, Canada, and as a teenager, went to high school in Jamaica, in Kingston, Jamaica, in the '80s. And this will uh, give you some insight a bit later on when we go further into discussion of into my career. It had a huge impact on my future career. But in 1994, I left Canada to work at sea, and in '95, I settled in Australia and have been living here since then. I've been based overseas a few times. I was based in Fort Lauderdale just prior to the pandemic, and then for 3 years, I was based in Geneva, Switzerland, up until the end of 2023 when I returned home to Perth, Australia. I have one daughter who you have met already. So I'm the second Gelineau to be on your show. You interviewed my daughter, Emily Gelineau, it used to be about a year ago. And she's a very talented musician who is now performing on ships as a guest entertainer. So it's just her and I. And I'm in Perth because I want to be close to her. She was born here in Australia. I became an Australian citizen 13 years ago.
Now you kind of glossed over something. You didn't gloss over it, but it was you said something that caught my ear. You went to high school in Jamaica. So give us the circumstances around. I mean, that just seems that there had to be some kind of circumstances that brought you to Jamaica for high school. What were they?
And especially Kingston, Jamaica. This wasn't sun, sand, and rum punches. This was Kingston, Jamaica in the '80s. I was 14 years old. It was actually 40 years ago, in 1986. My background is my mother was a single mother. She had twins, my sister and I. And in 1983, when we were 11 years old, our mother suffered a brain aneurysm, and then while in hospital in a coma, had a stroke. Our
Oh wow, sorry to hear
He
that.
became handicapped. Our grandmother then had to come and raise my sister and I. And so at 13 years old, being a young boy turning into a man and facing those challenges of turning into a man and living in a house full of women, I faced some challenges at home and at school. And it was at that point my uncle, who is a career banker and living in the West Indies for he ended up for over 30 years for his career, was currently in Puerto Rico and said, look, Jason's going to come live with me at least for a couple of years and give my grandmother a break. You know, she had her hands full taking care of my handicapped mother and, of course, my sister, my twin sister. But as the move approached, he was transferred to Kingston, Jamaica. And it was great because one of my best friends growing up in Ottawa, Canada, where I'm from, was Jamaican. And I had been to the Virgin Islands, I've been to Puerto Rico. I was a huge fan of reggae music, and I thought this is great. The movie Club Paradise had just come out with Robin Williams and Jimmy Cliff, and I thought this is great. And
Mm-hmm.
I arrived in Kingston, Jamaica, and it was quite an eye opener in the sense that. I think the first thing that hit me, and anyone who's been to the Caribbean and in Jamaica is an incredible country, incredible people, but they have a lot of challenges, particularly economically, and it really opened my eyes to the opportunities that we are very fortunate with. When I call it the DNA lottery, that we're born in a country where no matter your background, you can become someone. And so I realized then that I was wasting a lot of opportunities in Canada through my you know adolescent, but frivolous behavior and immature behavior, and that I had great opportunities if I put my mind to it. And so Jamaica taught me a lot. Interesting enough, this weekend when I get to Fort Lauderdale, my best friend from that time, Martin Stevenson, who now lives in Florida, Jamaican. The family adopted me because they saw this little young lad from Canada with a bachelor banker uncle who never raised a child and said, we need to take care of this young man under our arms, and they did. And so this weekend, or over the next couple of weeks while I'm in Florida, we'll be celebrating that 40-year anniversary of being adopted into another family, into a Jamaican family. So my Jamaican name is Jason, and I speak full patois, which usually surprises people, particularly on a cruise ship.
What a story! So when the book is written about Jason's life, Jamaica's going to have at least a chapter.
Yeah, now that I'm in the cruising, it's the anchor. It's when holds me down and found my spot. But it's really, the Caribbean and particularly Jamaica. Jamaica most so for hospitality, and also ships. But it was by touring. He was the vice president of credit, so we would get invited to resorts like Hedonism in Jamaica, and Sandals in the early days. And there I was, now a 14-year-old kid from Ottawa, Canada, who didn't like the cold, and I'm seeing what hospitality is all about. And that's when I made the decision I wanted to be in hospitality. He did say to me, my uncle, before I made the decision, because I wanted to move back to the Caribbean, is to read the book "Don't Stop the Carnival" by Herman Walk, which explains all the wonderful elements of living in the West Indies, and the colorful characters and the culture that you get to experience. I did get to live in the Bahamas 6 years ago when I was opening MSC Cruises Ocean Key, and that brought me back to kind of a full circle moment of being back in the region and making a living in an area that helped me decide what my career is going to be.
We'll be right back.
The Joy of Vacation by Dream Vacations invites you to join us on a bucket list adventure to Africa. We're going to Kenya and Egypt for 14 days, April 10th through April 24th, 2027. A week in Kenya, including safaris, and a week in Egypt, including the pyramids and a 4-day Nile River cruise. This adventure includes air from the U.S., all transfers, all accommodations, private tours, and many meals. $5,000 to $5,500, depending on air, per person. Double occupancy. Only $250 per person deposit due at booking. The remainder is not due until late 2026. For a detailed itinerary, online brochure, and to book, email me at pthornton, THORNTON, pthornton @dreamvacations.com. You're the second travel, I consider you a travel icon, and you're the second travel icon that I have hosted with roots as a youth to the West Indies. The other was Scott Eddy.
A good friend of mine. And that's what, Scott and I have known each other for about 3 years. And it was when we both identified that, half his family is Jamaican, Lebanese Jamaican, and my background is Jamaican. And we text almost every day. And we open our text with "Wagwan, brethren." That's how Scott and I communicate with each other.
So what drew you, Jason, to a life at sea?
So after I returned to Canada from living in Jamaica, I got into hospitality right away. I started as a dishwasher in a restaurant in my hometown, and then I joined a cooperative education program through my high school and was placed at a hotel called the Delta Hotel, and went through their program, working in all the different departments, and was hired as a midnight bellman, and that's how I started my hotel career. And in '94. I got transferred, 93, my apologies, to Whistler, to the ski resort. And while working there, I worked with a friend who had worked on cruise ships. And I was 22 and I was being passed over for promotions because of my age, not because of my experience, but because of my age. And my friend said, "Listen, why don't you go travel for a couple of years, save some money, go work on a ship." And, I grew up watching the Love Boat. I'd seen the cruise ships coming in and out of the port. I got to visit the Cunard Countess in 1980. Oh my goodness, I think 84, in San Juan, as 12-year-old. And so I thought, you know what, that's not a bad idea. I wanted to travel. I didn't want to have to pay for it. And I thought, I'm going to do 2 years at sea. Well, that was in 1994. And here we are in 2026, and I'm celebrating next month, well, April, it's this month, 32 years in the cruise industry. I got into it and I was a junior purser with Princess Cruises. So I was gopher with Isaac's personality, I used to say. And I just found my people, my place. And I just absolutely loved the lifestyle. I loved the way of service. I'd already been in hospitality, excuse me, and to be able to combine that and to work in such a multicultural environment really was fantastic. And that it brought me to Australia in '95. I married a passenger I had met. Unfortunately, we're no longer married. Or I like to say, I met my future ex-wife on the Love Boat. But we have our beautiful daughter, Emily, which, we're very proud of. And Emily just took her mom on the Seabourn sojourn with her when she was performing 2 weeks ago. And we're still very, very close. We don't live far from each other. But it brought me to Australia, and I've been to Australia on my first contract, and I loved it, and have fell in love with this country. But the cruise industry has been I've had breaks in between over the years, but I'd say 90% of my time since 1994 until I semi-retired in 2023 has been in the cruise industry, and I've worked for many different cruise lines, but it has been very good to me, and you just find a place where you feel natural, and the cruise industry where I felt natural.
Now we have, Jason, I surmise that we have a number of aspiring cruisers who would like to someday take a cruise. So I like to always ask my guests to talk about their first cruise, when, what ship, initial impressions. So I take it that your first cruise was to go to work, right?
100%. Yeah, I'd never, except for that quick visit one evening. It was Christmas Eve in San Juan. Friends of my uncle were going on a Christmas cruise, and they knew the first officer, and I got to go on board and play in the video arcade with the first officer's kids. That was the only opportunity I had to be on a ship, and I mean, I don't remember too much of it. It was, it was a 2 or 3 hour visit. So my first time sailing was, yes, I did my training cruise on the old Regal Princess out of Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale in April of 1994. And then I transferred to the Golden Princess, which was the original Royal Viking Sky in Hilo, Hawaii, which ended up being an 8.5 month contract. So I did Hawaii, then I did 4 or 5 months in Alaska, and then we did a 105-day Grand Pacific from Vancouver to LA through, the Russian Far East, the Orient, Japan, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, the South Pacific, and back through Hawaii. So that was my first cruising. My first cruise as a passenger, as a guest, was in 2000. I was flying to join a ship in Fort Lauderdale, another Princess ship, which actually ended up being my last contract with Princess in 2000. And it was just after the millennium, so they'd flown me Australia, Singapore, London to Miami, the long way around. And while I was in Singapore, I entered a competition. I had quite a long layover. It was called Once in a Millennium. And so they had these boxes. So you filled out this little ballot and I put it in. And about a month and a half later, I got a call from my then wife and said, "Do you want a trip?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I totally forgot. And she says, "No, you want a trip." She said, "I thought it was a scam, but I went online." And so we won a trip to Singapore, airfare, got to stay at the Four Seasons in Singapore. And then it was a 3-night, 4-day cruise on Star Cruises Superstar Virgo, sailing out of Singapore to up to the Gulf of Thailand, to a Malaysian port, to a Thai port. So it was quite interesting. It was a very different way of cruising, very casino based, a lot of families and stuff like that. But that was my first time as an actual passenger on a ship and not getting paid.
So back on that first cruise as an employee, I take it you probably were so busy picking up the job that you didn't think about it being your first time at sea.
No, and the only time is as we were sailing from Hawaii to Vancouver, midway through the Pacific, we hit some pretty rough seas, and that's when it reminded me. And I was on an old Royal Viking ship. It was called the Golden Princess, but it had that long bow, and it had been made for world voyages. So she rode the waves quite well. But I was in a decade cabin sharing with the radio officer, and there was one night where I looked at the window, which the lifeboat was just outside of my life jacket, and I said, "How quick can I jump over him to get out there?" Yeah, you were so busy, and there's the inductions and the safety trainings and learning the job and learning the lifestyle. And interesting enough, several of my colleagues from that first contract are still close friends of mine to this day,
Get out.
30 years ago. Yeah.
The notion of sailing, that just being at sea, were you, I guess, since you weren't a passenger, asking were you immediately hooked is probably not appropriate. I guess you were immediately okay with cruising, other than that little bit of rough seas.
I had my sea legs. Interesting. Coming from a landlocked place like Ottawa, Canada, I mean, the roughest seas you get are on the Ottawa River or the Rideau Canal, so it's not so rough. Um, so I was very fortunate that I had sea legs, and I took to the sea life very well. I never cruised as an actual guest, a passenger, until I semi-retired, and that was in 2024. And I took a Virgin Voyages cruise out of out of Melbourne for 3 days. And it wasn't, my daughter was, Emily was quite, she said, are you going to be able to enjoy it? And the point of enjoyment was the point, could I turn off, not paying attention to everything, as a former hotel director, general manager, then senior vice president hotel operation, who's very focused on the guest experience. Would I be able to go on board and enjoy it without, being distracted by, oh, something's not right, or this is not right, or looking for things? And funny enough, I was. And since then, in the last 2.5 years, I've taken several cruises. I just got back from Antarctica 6 weeks ago, my first time down there, 14 days, and we had very rough seas in the Drake. I didn't get sick, got worn out from all the seas, but yeah, I now consider myself a cruiser. But I love just being on the ocean. I need to be near the water. My condo here in Perth, I live over the pool. I'm 10 minutes from the beach, 5 minutes from the river. I need to live near the water because of my time at sea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the question Emily asked you is a good one, because I have hosted a number of people with long time careers at sea who have not been able to enjoy cruising as a passenger. Uh, uh, I had a great interview. I mentioned him in the introduction. Joe Falk is the
Mhm.
designer of most of Carnival ships and a lot of Costa ships. He's retired now, of course. He retired in, I think, 2014. And, I interviewed him. It's been close to 3 years now, because it was right at the beginning of the podcast. And he has been invited, as you might imagine, to many, many Carnival inaugural sailings. And he just can't bring himself to do it. And they always have various various reasons. There's another gentleman I interviewed. He's a retired captain. He was a captain for Holland America, and he can't bring himself to cruise. I mean, not only can't bring himself to cruise. He has zero desire.
Mhm.
However, he does say he never has been on a river cruise, and he's looking at that. The daughter of Everett Phillips, the late great food and beverage leader. I talked to his daughter, and they went on a couple of cruises with him. He did most of his career at Carnival, but they went on a couple of non-Carnival cruises with him, and he just couldn't get into vacation mode.
Mhm.
He was always, you know, uh, uh, you could see the wheels turning in his head as meals were served, and they were doing things that he would correct if he were on Carnival, stuff like that. Doesn't sound like it affected you, though.
Well, interesting enough. So, when my daughter and I would go out to dinner while I was, still working full time, she learned to make sure that I took the seat facing the wall, because if I was watching the dining room or the kitchen, she would watch me, paying attention and noticing this, and she goes, "Dad, can you not?" So she learned very early in her life to how to distract me to make sure I couldn't watch. Because as as a hotelier, you want to sit where you can see everything that's going on. But one, I've never sailed yet as a guest on a brand that I worked on. So all the companies I've sailed with have been other brands. I have been invited a couple of times already to cruise on other brands as a guest of theirs. And normally they're soliciting feedback, and thankfully they respect my place in the industry and my reputation, to give them that feedback on what they do right, and on where maybe there's areas for some improvement. So it's been great to experience that. But the way I looked at it, I think I've worked so hard in my career serving. I deserve to be on the other side of the bar, as they say, being able to sit at the bar, which you can never do, when you work on a ship, and to be able to enjoy that. And do I notice things? Of course I do. But I also remind myself it's not my operation. I had my time. I did my time. Now it's my time to enjoy it. And I've done a short 3 day. I've done, the longest was 14 days. The Antarctica one I just did. I did a Kimberley cruise on a 32 passenger boat true north up in Western Australia last year with 32 guests. I'm scheduled to sail on Arroyo out of Jeddah in 5 weeks, but at the moment the ship is currently stuck in Dubai. So let's see. I'm about to go during this trip to Florida in 2 weeks. I'll be going on Margaritaville at Seas Islander out of Tampa for 4 days. Last year I did Utopia to Seas for 4 days. I did an NCO cruise 2 years ago from Lisbon to Miami. So I'm getting a variety of different companies, and I'm a ship geek. So I, even like this weekend, Villa V's Odyssey was here in Fremantle, and a friend of mine who had been a cruise director for 35 years at sea, and we worked together on the World 20 years ago. He's sailing on board as a renter, and I was intrigued to see the ship because she's had quite the interesting reputation in her delivery, and so to be able to go on board. And so I do try to visit ships here in Fremantle, the port for Perth, when I do, because I just love ships. And in our industry, it's amazing how many ships I go on and people know me because I've sailed with them. Now my daughter's getting that, she goes on ships, and so people come up to her and they go, because she's a spitting image of me, and they see the surname and they're going, "Would you be related?" They always say Sir Jason or Mr. Jason. And she goes, "Yes, that's my dad. That's my dad." So, our industry is so small, and I love to see people who have grown in their career and have been able to progress.
Now, on the various brands that you worked, did your family ever? I know that I think I heard you say that you've never sailed on the brands you worked on, but when you were working on them, did your family members ever sail with you, or not with you,
Yeah.
but on the
So
ship while you were working?
Yes, yes, yeah. And that was one of the nice benefits, of the friends and family policy. And obviously, as my career grew, that benefit grew. But when I first got married in the 90s and I was with Princess, so I worked for Princess, probably to go back in my history of cruise lines and say,
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do
so
that.
I worked for Princess for 6 years from 94 to 2000. Started as a junior assistant purser working on reception, and I left as a senior assistant purser and shore excursion manager. I then joined Silversea when they only had 2 ships, when we were about to introduce their third, the Silver Shadow, in 2000. And that's when I moved into luxury as a chief purser. In 2003, I left Silversea and I joined the World of Residency, which was only in its infancy. It was just about to celebrate its first anniversary. And I was with the World for 2 years as a front office manager. And then from there in 2005, I moved to Oceania Cruises, which at that stage was just introducing Nautica, their third ship, as a chief purser. In 2008, I was promoted to general manager with Oceania and stayed with Oceania until 2013. I took 3 years off while my daughter was finishing high school because you just never know how things are going to go with teenagers these days. She did an amazing job. She's more mature than I am. And I worked in aviation. I started a food truck. But when she got accepted to go to university in Boston at the Berklee College of Music, She actually said to me just week after she was accepted, she said, "Dad, what are you going to do when I'm gone?" Because she is the only family I have in Perth. And I thought about that, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back to sea. And I went back for 3 more years with Seabourn as a hotel director on the Sojourn specifically, because there was a 3 month on, 3 month off rotation. When I left Seabourn, I then joined MSC in the corporate role in the U.S., developing their brand in the U.S. as well as opening their private island in the Bahamas, Ocean Key. And then I reopened Ocean Key during the return to cruising in 2021. But during the downturn, I was actually consulting on their new luxury brand, which at that stage had no name. And in 2021, I was named as head of product or senior vice president of hotel operations for Explora Journeys. And so I spent the last 2 years in Geneva building the team and developing the entire onboard experience for Explora Journeys. So going back to your question about travel, so when Emily's mom and I were married, she would sail with me in on Princess. When Emily was born, her first cruise, she was 7 months old, and that was on the Crown Princess out of the Caribbean, out of Fort Lauderdale. And then when I moved to Silversea, we were sailing in Australia, and her first Christmas at sea was on Silver Cloud. So at a year and a half, she got her first taste of luxury. She's definitely been bitten by the luxury bite. But then I didn't have them sail with me because her mom and I then broke up, and Emily being young. I had my twin sister sail with me on Oceania in 2010 in the Baltics. And then Emily, while she was at school in Boston, came and sailed with me on Seabourn when she was 17 in Alaska. And then she came with a friend from Antigua to Miami in 2018. And so, yeah, so, you get those benefits and the senior roles as you get your single cabin, you have that opportunity of your family on board. And I know it's increased a lot in years because it's a challenging lifestyle to be away from family. And that's one of the things that cruise lines have really done well for a lot of those that have the privilege to be able to have family on board.
Wow, lucky Emily. I mean, to grow up essentially on luxury ships. Here I've been cruising almost 40 years, and I sailed my first luxury ship last year. Your handiwork, Explorer One.
Thank you. That was my baby.
Oh,
Emily's my first baby. Explorer One was my second baby, and I was there from the drawing board, and everything that you experience on board. I drove. I hired my culinary team, the spa, entertainment, guest services, housekeeping. And most of my heads of department, 70% of them I had sailed with before. I had worked with them at other brands. And so I went through all the different brands that I worked with, and I said, okay, who's the best at food? Well, Frank Oranger, who's the best at Murray. So, that's how I went around. And when I reached out to a lot of them, they were so excited about the project and the family, the Aponte family, and through the chairman, Pier Francesco Vago, he gave us, they had a vision, but with a white piece of paper. So this is the vision. Here's the white piece of paper, and then we would present and check and verify and get stamp of approval to what you got to experience, which I truly believe is the best cuisine at sea. I mean, truly a European hotel at sea, great wellness program on board. So, and we did everything in house and in a very short amount of time. So it was a pinnacle in my career and something I am extremely proud of.
well, both your babies I've experienced up close and personal. Of course, Emily, at a digitally, and then Explora Journeys, and that was my first, but certainly not my last luxury cruise. And so, at least at this point, when I get on all kind of Facebook cruise groups and all that, and every few days I'll see a question about the best food at sea. And I can very confidently state Explora Journeys. I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, no one approaches them. And I've been on some pretty nice ships, but I have yet to experience the Seabourns and the Region 7 Seas of the world. But as for right now, Explorer is by itself when it comes to cuisine. You've given us quite a few. Give us a few highlights of your favorite ports over the years. either as a cruise line employee or a passenger. Now, I don't suppose as an employee you got to enjoy the ports very much, but maybe not. Maybe you did.
I did. But what you do is you learn to do it in the express version. And
Okay.
so if you've got an afternoon do break, say from 12 to 4, you know how to maximize your time. Some people want to go out and have a meal. And, I remember one day, I was in the Porto Livorno, this was on Oceania, and I took the train to Pisa to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And then I get back. And when I had dinner with some guests that night, and they said, "What do you do on your lunch break?" I said, "Well, I go and see the Leaning Tower of Pisa." They go, "Well, I go to the bank to pay my bills," and for that impact. But there were times during the career where you get that opportunity to go on overland or full day tours. And earlier in my career, Princess, we did a lot of China, and at that time the ship would stay in a port for 3 days, and all the guests would disembark. And so we go into Beijing, and we would have a convoy of 28 ships and of buses, sorry, and then some of us would be chosen to escort onwards to Xi'an. So I got to see the Great Wall of China within 4 years, and sun, rain, and snow. I got to see the terracotta soldiers twice. Another time with Oceania, I got to do a full day tour from St. Petersburg to Moscow with the flight, which is great. On the way back from Asia to Europe on Nautica, I did a full day tour to Aqaba to Petra. Still one of my favorites. I mean, Petra is just an unbelievable place. But a lot of people then say, is there places you haven't been? Well, up until a month and a half ago, I hadn't been to Antarctica. And if it's inland, I've not been there. And so there's places like, the Taj Mahal and Machu Picchu I'd love to get to. So there's still places on my bucket list, my to-do list. So it's such a big question when you're a traveler, what's your favorite place? And I said, they're favorites for different reasons. One of my favorites as all time is probably Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City. We were one of the first cruise ships to sail up the Saigon River in 1994, and the embargo on travel to Vietnam had just been lifted, and to go there and to sail right up and be in Saigon, and everything was pretty much as that as it had been when Saigon fell in the mid-70s. A few years later, on Silversea, we called into Vietnam, and one of our guests was Roberta McCain, Senator John McCain's mom, and she was a regular sailor with us, and I would have dinner with her regularly. She was lovely, just a great Southern woman, and she was going on a bus tour to Hanoi, and her son had just been on a visit, his first visit since he was a POW, and the tour operator Tuan, who's a very good friend of mine, and he'll be seeing Emily in a month when she's on Viking in Vietnam. I've known him for years. I said, Tuan, this is Mrs. McCain, and he grabbed her, well, not literally, but he grabbed, and he said, Miss McCain, we have a car for you. He says you cannot go to Hanoi, the place where your son was held prisoner of war, on a bus with 30 other people. And so those opportunities and experiences you remember, and they vividly stay with you.
Wow. Was this her first visit to Hanoi after his release?
As far as I'm aware.
Oh,
as
my
far as I
goodness.
am aware, yes, it was.
Wow. Another anecdote for your book.
That's a chapter. That's
Yeah,
because I have dinner with her regularly, and she was such a gentle woman, such a Southern lady, but she never bragged. She would say her husband and her son were in the military, but they never say. And then people would say, "Who is she?" But she would never brag, never get. And she always traveled with a friend. And she mentioned the story of when her husband died on the flight from Europe back, and I think it was President Bush Sr. at the time that gave special permission for the plane to land and take care of him. It's such a iconic family in American history, and to be able to sit there and have dinner. And I tell you, when I moved into luxury, particularly at Silversea in 2000s, the people you met, I was chief bursar, so I'd open the passports and I go, oh, look who we have on board, and we had the who's who of business and entertainment, and I remember when Silver Whisper came out. She was chartered by Coca-Cola of South Africa, and it was all the guests were the top Coke distributors in Africa. It was challenging with visas.
Oh, wow.
And this was before she had her inaugural cruise as Silversea, and they wanted to paint the Coke logo on the funnel, but Silversea said, no, you can't do that. The guest of honor on board was Madiba. It had Nelson Mandela, and the guest entertainer, Diana Ross. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Wow.
It was just, yeah, you still pinch yourself, to these opportunities, and I, they still happen, and the cruise industry is one of those industries, and it's so diverse with so much options of price point, of service style, of, size, everything. But the people it attracts, you think, oh, these people, they'd have a private yacht. No, and we just saw pictures this winter of Nicole Kidman on Silversea, Michael, what's his name, with Catherine Zeta-Jones, and her husband Michael on the Silversea Cruise. I used to get Jacqueline Smith, from Charlie's Angels, the late great Gary Marshall from Happy Days when Laverne and Shirley would sail regularly, Richard Sherman and brothers, he would be a guest entertainer on board, and all these elements. And I always pinch myself. I said, I'm just a kid from Ottawa, Canada. It's have dinner with them, and they would be interested in me, and I'm just like, I'm just this kid from mine. They were interested in the lifestyle and hearing about all these things. But the thing that they appreciated is that you treated them as normal human beings, and even though they were quite extraordinary in many ways in their professional lives, that here they were in a controlled environment with like-minded people and just really enjoying it. Another anecdote, my first contract on Silversea, we were on the Silver Cloud, and we called into Hobart, into Devonport in Tasmania. And so the agent said, look, there's local media. Would you be able to come down and speak? And I said, sure. So I came down. I was one of the only native English speaking officers at that time. So, the captain and the hotel director, no, Jason, you speak English. You live in Australia, go. So, we're doing an interview and being very, not to going into too much detail, obviously, to respect the privacy of the guests. And they said, would it be okay if we interviewed a guest? I said, well, you need to ask them. So they stopped the couple coming back on board the ship, and then they interviewed the couple. And the judge, she went, the young reporter, she must have been about 21. And she said, oh, wow, he was really well spoken. I said, well, you should have been. You really picked the lottery on that one. She goes, why? I said, that's Gary Marshall. She goes, who's Gary Marshall? I said, you need to go. And my friend of mine who lives in Hobart, and he said he saw on the news, and they said, "Oh, big Hollywood star comes to." And had I not told her, she wouldn't have had a clue who she had interviewed. Just by he happened to be walking back, and she interviewed him. So, and I looked at him, and then he winked at me, and I think because he realized she didn't know who he was, so it was quite.
It's interesting, and when you discuss some of the ports that you went to as a sailor, as a, I guess you called an officer, right?
I was an officer, yeah. But the term I use is seafarer. I was a seafarer. I made my living at sea. And I'm not a big fan of the hierarchy of, crews. That, I mean, we're all there together. Yes, there's different privileges. I get that. And it's not always, balanced, but we're seafarers. We make our living at sea.
So when you were talking about the various ports that you all stopped at as a seafarer, one thing I noticed that you indicated a couple of times, you were at ports for multiple days. And do you know, Jason, I've been cruising 38 years and have never stopped at a port where we stayed overnight. Is that more typically a luxury thing or no?
Yeah, it is more of a luxury thing. And there's many reasons, first from the marketing perspective of selling in the itinerary, that you get to enjoy more time. And as we know, most cities have different personalities during the day, during the evening, especially when it comes to things like culinary and arts, going to dinner, going to the theater, going to, my friend who was on Villa V, and they stayed for 2.5 days. And so when he told me he was coming in early on the Saturday, and a friend offered me tickets to my team's Australian rules football team. So there was 50,000 people. We went to the stadium, his first game in Australia, and he's going to this Australian rules because we could. And then we were able to leave and go out for dinner. So in the luxury market, that is quite common. From a business perspective, there's a reason behind that. So a large ship of your contemporary brands, and where they charge for everything on board. If you're not on the ship, you're not spending money on the ship. And so they want to capture you as a captured market. So that's why they tend to sail at 4, 5, 6 p.m. And they get you on board. They open the casino, they open the shops, the bars are open, all the specialty restaurants. On a luxury ship, most things are included. And so if you're off the ship and not eating the food or drinking, that's better for my budget because I've budgeted for you to eat and you're not eating it because I don't expect you to pay for it because you're not. I'm paying for it. So there's that element of and being able to have that, people are very into the arts and stuff like that, friends visiting, that they get the opportunity to spend time ashore in the evening and do things the next day. One of the cruise lines I sailed with years ago, Oceania, was renowned for these 3-day turnarounds. Excuse me. So they come into places like Venice and Istanbul, Barcelona, Buenos Aires, and they would arrive. And the first day of the call was the last day of the cruise for the previous cruise. And so the guests would have full day to do tours, all that stuff. Then come back on board, have their dinner, pack, put their bags out. The next morning they disembark. That day, which is the middle day of our 3-day port call, the new guests would arrive, come on board, have dinner, and the next day they would go on tours. So we were earning, shore excursion revenue on both ends of that call. And it allows you time. And it was even better too. And I know NCL has just announced that, for anybody who books their air, they'll be flying you in the day before, and you're an avid traveler, Paul, with the challenges of travel and airline and weather and delays and strikes and whatever's happening in the world, to fly into a place the day of the cruise, the anxiety that you have, it's tight. And so being able to come in a day or two earlier, or knowing that the ship is staying for 2 days, that really saves you missing guests that have not been able to embark. But yeah, it is there very typical in the premium and luxury market, offering late sailings and overnight. And one of the things when we developed Explora Journeys, we were talking about going deeper, slower, and longer. So staying longer, doing more, going deeper into, and it allows people then to go inland as well and do a few things. So
let's shift gears a little bit. Jason, you're getting ready to participate in a pretty big industry event. You alluded to it at the top of the show. Talk about that and your role there. Most of my listeners are, and I don't mean to generalize, but I'm going to guess most of my listeners are more into the retail, the consumer side of cruising. But what you're about to do is pretty important and clearly impacts the consumer side of cruise. So talk about that.
Very much. Yeah. What you're referring to is Seatrade Cruise Global in Miami. So Seatrade Cruise is an association that has been holding these conferences. Last year was the 40th anniversary. And so this year we're celebrating the 41st anniversary. As I came through my career, Seatrade Cruise was always something that I looked up to. I never had the opportunity to go. I was supposed to go in April of 2020, and we know what happened then, that didn't happen. And so my first Seatrade Cruise was
April 2020. What happened?
Let me put a mask on, and you might remember. Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me.
So that unfortunately didn't happen, and my first one was in 2023 as the head of hotel operations for Explora Journeys, and then when I left, Seatrade reached out to me and asked me if I would be an ambassador, because now that I'm independent and I'd started my consulting, JAG Hospitality, which is me, Jason, Alan Gelineau, and someone who is well respected in the industry and it created a great I guess reputation in the industry. And so I went 2 years ago as an independent and was able to meet with a lot of people, a lot of potential clients who have become my clients in my consulting. And then the last year I attended as now a Seatrade Cruise Ambassador for guest experience and wellness. And my focus is promoting that side of the guest experience, the cruise leisure vacation opportunity. And so I moderate panels at these Seatrade Cruise. And so I've been to Seatrade Cruise Asia in Manila 2 years ago. This will be my fourth Seatrade Cruise Global in Miami. I was at Seatrade Cruise Europe in Hamburg back in September last year, and I'll be going to Seatrade Cruise Med in Las Palmas in September, as well as Seatrade Cruise Asia in Kuala Lumpur in November. So I'll be moderating several panels. One of the ones I'm most excited about is I'm bringing some industry legends. Rick Sasso, who's still with MSC Cruises, but really is a legend in Southeast Florida, with the cruise industry, his time at Celebrity and many other lines. Mark Conroy, who was with Radisson and Regent for many years, and David Giesdorf as well. The other panel I'm very excited about, which I started last year, is iconic hotel brands at sea, the evolution of these hotel brands. Last year, I had the president of Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection, Ernesto Fara, with me, as well as the president of Orient Express, Silences, Philip Bro. This year, I welcome back Philip, because as they're about to debut their first ship, Corinthian, in just over 2.5 months' time. But also, I'll be welcoming Jonathan Wilson, who's the president of Oman at Sea, and just confirmed last week, Ben Trod, the CEO of Four Seasons Yachts and Mark Henry Holdings. So really, last year, that panel was standing room only. And so what it is, there's probably... It takes up a huge part of Miami Beach Convention Center. There's probably over 2,000 exhibitors, including ports from around the world. A lot of my tourism Australian friends will be over there. So there's half of the expo is dedicated to ports and destinations, and the other half is the suppliers. So the major shipbuilders are there, Fincantieri, Meyer Werft, they're there. A lot of the suppliers, but anyone who's anyone in the cruise industry when it comes to operations, from presidents, CEOs, SVPs, hotel operations, entertainment, food and beverage, housekeeping, IT, safety, security, deck and engine, they're all there. And, we'll have Jason Liberty. We will have Pier Francesco Valgo on the panel, Bud Dar, the chairman of CLIA. We're going to have Josh Weinstein from Carnival Corporation and the new CEO and president of NCLH. And I apologize, I forget his name because he just stepped into that role a few weeks ago. So it's huge. The State of the Industry panel usually attracts about 3,000 people, and it's in the Grand Ballroom at the Miami Beach Convention Center. The next biggest panel was mine last year with about 110 people at the iconic hotel brands, and I expect that to happen again. And I will also have clients there. And then in addition to that, they have F&B at Sea, which takes place at Manor Wynwood, which is part of Seatrade, and that's for food and beverage professionals. And I'll be moderating for the third year in a row the opening panel, The State of the Industry, and I'll have Lincoln D'Souza from Royal Caribbean International, Marissa Christensen from Holland America Group, and one of my former team members, Albin Goica from Explora Journeys, in charge of food and beverage. So really, it's an incredible event. If you want to go to the expo, there's an opportunity. You can get a complimentary expo pass if you use my ambassador code, which is AMJG10. If you want a delegate pass, that does cost something, but they invite everyone and anyone from the cruise industry, and it's a great place to network, to meet. And there's an incredible after-hours life that takes place, including Bill Panoff's Sport Hole Party, which is legendary on the Tuesday night. But from Sunday all the way until Thursday, there are after-hour events and that. So it's a marathon, but it's the mecca of the cruise industry, and it is. I'm so excited to be flying over to attend it once again.
Man, I'd love to be a fly on the wall. I tell you. Hey, you mentioned food and beverage. Now he's probably a bit before your time. You've never met Everett Phillips, did you?
No, I know the name, but no, I never had the pleasure of meeting him.
Okay. Let's talk about general travel. You've alluded to some. Do you have much time to travel outside for leisure? And what do you have booked?
So, Paul, let me tell you what my friends say to me. Where are you and where are you going? I'm never home. I'm single. Emily's grown up. She's traveling on her own. I love summer here in Perth, but I love to get away. This year, I have probably 8 trips booked already, all the way up until December.
Oh, man.
I've got a couple pending. One of the things, maybe it's the addiction that the airlines give you, but after my corporate life, I got used to status on an airline. And so I thought, well, how do I maintain that? Because I really enjoyed that, and I've been able to. But a lot of my travel now is subsidized by my clients that I consult for to attend a lot of these events. So with Seatrade Cruise Global, I'll spend 4 weeks in the States in April, because as I mentioned, I've got my Jamaican family friends that are in Southeast Florida. I was based there, so I'll go from having lunch to happy hour to dinner with different people. I put a lot of mileage on the rental car, and I go between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. I'll head up to Tampa to go on Margaritaville at Sea, then over to Orlando, Lake Nona, where my best friend who I worked with at Silversea in the world lives. And then from there, I'll fly to Denver, and I'm going to do a road trip from Denver to LA. I'm an aviation geek as well, so I'll be visiting a lot of plane graveyards in Arizona and New Mexico and museums, and then head into San Diego and probably go see the Padres play. I'm a Blue Jays fan, but I love my baseball, and we don't have it to that extent here. My next trip is a couple of regional trips for some consulting work I do for Tourism Western Australia here. And then hopefully I'll be heading to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, first time, and then joining Arroyo to sail from Jeddah to Istanbul. From Istanbul, I'll go to Miami for another conference for 3 days, then back to Istanbul. A week after I get home in June, Emily, her fiance Danilo, and I will fly to Canada and have 3.5 weeks in Canada, taking them to where I grew up to see my sister, to my hometown, to the Montreal Jazz Festival, Niagara Falls, Toronto, and the cottage. And then we're going to fly to Brazil so I can meet his family. I've not met his family. And then in September, I've got a month in Europe to attend Seatrade Europe, hopefully a few cruises. And there's something missing, but in December, in November, I go to Seatrade in Asia in Kuala Lumpur. And then in December, I go back to Hamburg for another cruise ship interior expo. So I travel a lot. I've got a Bali trip coming up as well. I get antsy if I don't have a trip booked. If my suitcase is sitting too long, it's been 6 weeks since I got back from South America, although I've done a couple of trips here regionally. But I love to travel. It's in my blood. And I'm also, one of the things I saw during my career at sea is far too many guests, particularly North American guests who don't get a lot of vacation, save these big trips for when they retire. But we don't know what our health is going to be like. And so I want to get it out of the way and all that adventure while my body and my mind and my soul can do it. And if there's a point where, my health takes a different direction, that I can sit on my lazy boy and go, you know what, I did it. And so I make the most of the moment. And again, because I'm single and my daughter's grown up, it allows me that freedom. My friends are used to it. Sometimes I travel with my friends, but also I have so many friends overseas because of my time at sea that there's not a place that I go that I don't know somebody to catch up. And I'm a very social person. And that's one of the things, if you were to ask me, and you probably will, but before you ask me, what's the one thing I've taken from the cruise industry? It's the camaraderie and the friendship that I've grown and being able to maintain these friendships all these years.
What a year of travel, and we really only covered the next year or so. We follow each other on LinkedIn, so I'm going to keep my eyes open on LinkedIn for when Jason posts about a need for an administrative assistant.
Last year, actually, after Seatrade Summit, with all the social media activity that was going on LinkedIn, and that's where I spend most of my work, because again, I'm B2B. I'm not promoting to the consumer; I'm promoting to the business. But someone said, do you have someone doing socials? I said, no, that's me getting up at 5:30 in the morning and posting day before and scheduling things coming on. And I'm a multitasker. When you work on a ship and being a hotel director on a ship, you've got to be able to multitask. And so I can multitask and do many things, and it gives me energy. My daughter does laugh at my level of social media because I am 54. I'm not 24, but have become very creative and I enjoy it. But what I love doing, and people ask me, what do you do? And the simplest elevator pitch I can give is I say, I connect people and I champion our industry. I love our industry and I love the people in it, and I want to ensure I connect people. And when I'm connecting people, it's not just for business opportunities, it's for career opportunities, it's for guests, meeting other people. And, people reach out, I'm going on do you know anybody? Yeah, let me send you send a message, and, any professional courtesies. And so I just love seeing people happy. I was born to be in the service and hospitality industry, and I love to be able to make people happy.
Well, Jason, you have been all over the world, and mostly on luxury itineraries. Do you have any location still on your cruise and travel bucket list?
Well, you brought it up earlier with that captain. I've never done a river cruise. So any river cruise companies out there, and listen, if you want to invite me, I'm happy to come. I've never been on a river cruise, and while I was based in Geneva, and I would travel to Vienna and to Basel, and you'd see them, and you're like, wow, that's really interesting. And there's also that interest, professional interest of how they operate. But I've never been on a river cruise, so that's probably a big thing, particularly to go into Hungary and the Czech Republic, because I've never been to Prague, I've never been to Budapest, and they're a place I want to go. And then probably, as I mentioned earlier, maybe up toward out to the Galapagos and the Arctic, so Svalbard and that area. Those are areas that I'm still really keen to go to.
Wow. Well, it'll be easy to check off the river cruise, and I can almost guarantee you will love it. I did a podcast episode a few months ago. It was my top 10 all-time cruises, and number one was a river cruise. So, and I've only been on one river cruise.
You're selling it well already. Now I had the CEO and owner of Riverside Luxury Cruises, Garrett, on my panel at Seatrade Europe, and he was really interesting. And when I mentioned that to him, he says, "Well, we need to do something about that." So I might have to send him a message and say, "Do you remember me? And remember that conversation?"
Remind him. And I've had Riverside on not him, but I've had Riverside on the show. By the way, I mentioned that top 10 all-time cruises. Explora Journeys was in the top 4. So I think Explora Journeys was number 4.
Well, that was the goal, when we set out, as I mentioned, my career of working on all those legacy luxury brands, and many of the people that I brought in had worked at those different brands. So we knew what they were doing, and we also knew where some of the shortcomings were happening in the guest experience. And we said, how can we deliver it with a European edge? Because that was the goal. And having never had any guests before, so it's not like we had to look at changing things that would have upsetted any loyal guests, and we were creating something. And as Pier Francesco Vago rightly said, we're creating a category of our own, and we are creating a luxury lifestyle brand, hence why they're not called Explora Journeys Cruise Line. And as you've experienced, we wanted our guests to come on board and feel as if they were in a boutique European hotel, which I think they definitely succeeded at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Jason, you've got a lot to prepare for in the ensuing 4 or 5 weeks. So we don't want to hold you too long. But before we let you go, we usually ask our guests some light or fun cruise questions. And senior executives and travel icons like fun too. So the first question, how do you spend your me time?
With friends.
So no cruising, no travel. What are you like? You play chess? What hobbies do you have?
I love movies. I love watching movies. I've set up my apartment at home with a nice big screen, lazy boy chair. Because I travel a lot and I'm very social. I do love my time at home. And I also love, I volunteer. Because I think time is the greatest gift you can give. And I volunteer with a charity in Australia called Oz Harvest. That's a food recovery charity that collects food from supermarkets that may be close to its expiry date or its excess. And then we either prepare it into meals. I work as a chef with them. We teach classes to corporate attendees on how to reduce food waste at home. And then that food then gets distributed to charities that help those, and particularly with the financial crisis and the cost of living crisis, there's a lot of food insecurity. So that's something that's very important to me. And attending my daughter's gigs when I can, because while I was away working at sea and then living in Miami and living in Geneva, I missed a lot of that. And so being home and being able to go and support her and her fiance in their gigs is very important. But really, it's about friends and family. Those are the important ones. Mm-hmm. You sacrifice a lot of that when you work at sea, special occasions. So I like to make sure that's a priority.
Great. What's your favorite cruise drink and cruise food?
Well, I make my drink a favorite drink, whether I'm on a cruise or not, but it'd have to be a Negroni. I'm definitely a Negroni man. I love a Negroni, and being able to taste different versions on different cruise lines, it's great. But years ago would have been the BBC, the Banana Bailey's Colada, but I've gone away from fruity and creamy drinks, but a Negroni is definitely my go-to cocktail.
Banana Bailey Colada is still one of mine.
I listen. I would never say no. It's only because I'm trying to watch the waistline and stuff. But and food. You asked about food. I love food. Period. And so I love a good steakhouse. To be when a steak is done well. But more so, I'm very much into living in Australia. Pan Asian cuisine is very. When we created Sakura on Explora, it was great to do the menu tastings on there. But I just love to try different things. But my classic go-to would be beef Wellington. I love a good beef Wellington.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You are a world traveler. I like to ask world travelers, have you tried any exotic cuisine?
Yes, I'm fairly open-minded to a certain level. I know I've eaten something that wasn't beef in China. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I was beef. I'm trying to think the most crocodile, probably crocodile. I always think if something could bite you, why can't you bite it back? I've had crocodile several times here in Australia, and emu, and emu is quite good. Yeah, quite good.
I've had alligator in gumbo.
Very similar.
It's crocodile, alligator, pretty much. I never get them. I don't know how to differentiate between a crocodile and an alligator.
It's their nose. It's their nose. A crocodile's more, I think, pointy, whereas an alligator is more flat. Listen, if I get that close to it, I'm not asking if it's a crocodile and alligator. I'm just saying, how the heck did I get into this situation?
What's your most wonderful or memorable or funniest or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
Well, the most memorable and for not always the greatest reason was in 2008. It was my first contract as general manager with Oceania. I was on Nautica, and we came under attack by Somali pirates.
Oh, wow.
It was November 30th at 9:30 in the morning in 2008. I remember this well. And two Somali pirate skips were coming after us. They were shooting their guns. Thankfully, didn't have any RPGs, but that was a hair-raising moment.
Wow.
And the captain at the time, Captain Julika Brajcic, who's now retired from Dubrovnik, won a Seafarers Award in Croatia for his ability to outrun them. And there were many things that we could have another podcast just about this situation that we had already taken in precaution, but still, when it happens, it's your goosebumps are on your goosebumps.
Well, speaking of precautions, you mentioned a couple of times the world, and I hosted a guest. He was an owner at the World, and if you go back, well, you couldn't see it now, but when I promoted that episode on the internet, I have one shot of a guy who looks like he is dressed for Iran, except he's dressed for duty on the World because they were about to enter an area renowned for pirates. So, okay, let's see. Oddball question. So I have an oddball question. I call it an oddball question because it doesn't necessarily have to do with cruising. So first of all, let me welcome Jason's fans and friends listening. We hope your fans have enjoyed what they have heard at the Joy of Cruising podcast, and we'll come back for future episodes. Jason, share one thing that, of course, my listeners and your fans and friends don't know about Jason.
There's not too much people don't know about me. I think the Jamaican patois accent gets a lot of people who may have not seen me in that social side. But the other one, and I shared this on LinkedIn recently, in 1997 and in 2000, I got to work on two Hollywood movies.
Get out!
The first one was Thin Red Line with Nick Nolte and Sean Penn.
I saw it.
Cusack.
I saw it.
And if you don't blink at 2 hours and 2 minutes, I'm carrying a stretcher behind Nick Nolte and Ilias Kotes. So, and I got to have lunch with Nick Nolte a couple of times and stuff. And then 3 years later, in the same location, I was in the remake of South Pacific with Harry Connick Jr. and Glenn Close. And so I got to sing "There's Nothing Like a Dame in the World." So yeah, that was my short-lived Hollywood career.
Wow. Oh, well, I've seen Thin Red Line, but I'm going to watch it again. And the other, I have not seen. Now, is it a musical?
Yes, South Pacific, a musical. It was made for ABC for TV, whereas, of course, Thin Red Line was nominated for, I think, 7 or 8 Oscars, but it was the same year as Saving Private Ryan, which absolutely cleaned up. But the director, Terrence Malick, had come out of retirement and directed, and John Toll, who was the cinematographer, who was twice awarded an Oscar for previous films. Watching how they made a film was incredible.
Yeah.
And this was filmed in the cane fields near the hospital where Emily was born in North Queensland in Australia.
I love Thin Red Line, so I'll easily be able to watch that again. Musicals, I don't take to musicals well, so I'll clench my teeth and watch it until I see you.
Well, if you know what, you don't have to clinch too long, because as the Grumman Goose lands and Harry Connick Jr. comes out, I'm seen walking in the background, and after that, you can turn it off. Then.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really see me clearly after that.
Okay. Last question, Jason, then we'll let you go. What is the one place that you have visited, or the one thing that you have been able to do in your life that cruising enabled, that you just you just will never forget? I'm sure you'll never forget many of the places that you cruising enabled, but what is the one thing cruising has turned you on to that you hold on to forever?
Empathy, and diversity, and understand. Being raised in Canada, I was raised in a very diverse neighborhood, but really, when you get to go to the countries where the crew members come from, so the Philippines and India and Bali and and South Africa and Ukraine or places like that, and to meet and see their families and see how they live and stuff, that is priceless.
Mm-hmm.
But what do I get to do? I get to do this, Paul. I mean, I've semi-retired. I've had a very successful career in the cruise industry, a pinnacle of developing a luxury brand with Explora Journeys, and I'm asked to come to these conferences and share my thoughts and my opinions and my voice. They want to hear my voice, and I get to interact with people and celebrate our industry. And now, as a guest, I get to go on these ships and sail and enjoy it. So and now to see my daughter succeed in going on a lot of these ships and performing, and people coming up to her and saying, "Oh, I knew your dad," and saying positive things to her, and then me going, "Oh, we saw Emily perform on the ship, and wow, she's so talented." So for that to run in the family, even though she's not getting into hospitality, she's still within that industry that I'm in, and to follow in that footsteps it makes me extremely proud. On our own 2 feet.
Jason, it has been great having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. Give my best to Emily.
I will.
And all the best to you in your future endeavors. And as I like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate it.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99, can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.